you. Johnny Mercer wants to come in at this point.
Thanks very much. Thank you for that. That's really interesting. How long have you specified that an individual risk assessment should be done for each individual who takes this drug? So has that been from the beginning, or did you bring that in '96 when the report came out, or when did that start happening?
Okay, so because it's a legal classification of this product is a prescription-only medication.
Yeah.
The requirement for a prescribing physician is that they are making that assessment on
Okay, so I see what you mean. So that should have happened. That's the process of prescribing. So what sort of view would you take against an organisation that essentially did some sort of mass distribution? So it had a group of individuals that were going to an area and said, there you go, there's your anti-malarials, crack on. Yeah. Is that in line with the manufacturer's guidelines, or is it outside of those very clear manufacturer's guidelines?
So you alluded to in the first part of your question the heightened information, and that's the information that's been passed around to you in the risk minimisation plan. As more safety data is accumulated for a product, and this happens for any product, the emergence of rarer adverse events becomes evident.
Sorry. Yeah. The premise of my question is that if there is an organisation that does not do individual risk assessments, is that or is that not clearly outside of the manufacturer's guidelines?
Yeah, the expectation would be that an individual risk assessment is done
that's the
by
expectation,
prescribers.
but is that outside of your guidelines? Yes or no? You have your very clear guidelines. Yeah. Is that outside or inside?
So, I mean, the regulations for prescribing, of course, are not set by Roche, but a physician in prescribing maintains their own conduct under the terms of their GMC.
But when you push out the drug, you have your manufacturer's guidelines, and within that, you say this should be prescribed after this assessment. So if an organisation goes outside of that, surely they are using that outside of the guidelines that you have stated as the manufacturers of that drug.
So yes, the guidelines do say an individual risk assessment should be done, and in the material that we've circulated there's a checklist that the physicians are supposed to go through with each individual
and they go through that in detail. But if that's not done, they are using that outside of the guidelines that you as manufacturers have laid down, correct?
Outside of the terms of the summary of product characteristics.
Correct? Yes. Yeah, and that checklist has been in place as more and more evidence has come forward, as I understand it.
That's correct.
But just to be really clear, if they use it outside of those guidelines, if they're using it as mass distribution, not as a result of an individual check, that is outside of the guidelines that you very specifically put down, as any drug manufacturer does when they release a drug to the market.
Yeah, so it's not that it's a guideline, it's the summary of product characteristics. So, I mean, the summary of product characteristics is available for all products. This is a required document that the physician should be familiar with.
Forgive me.
Can I just come in for a moment? Can I just be a little bit clearer? There seems to be a problem with terminology. The point that Mr. Mercer is making is that you make a recommendation as to an assessment that ought to be made in respect of each individual who is going to be given this medication. And all he's asking you is fairly straightforward, is if that individual assessment is not made, then the organisation that hands out that drug indiscriminately and en masse is not following your recommendation. I don't quibble about whether it's guidelines or anything else. You're recommending a procedure that should be followed, and it's surely a fairly straightforward question, deserving a straightforward answer. If your recommendation is not followed, then the organisation that's issuing the drugs en masse without the individual assessment is actually operating in contravention of your recommendation. Surely that has to be true.
Yes, that is true, but the point that I'm trying to make is that the prescribing decision should sit, because of the legal classification of the drug as being a prescription-only medication, the prescribing decision sits with the physician. So the expectation would be that a physician sees every individual prior to prescribing any drug which sits under the legal classification.
Yes, and if that expectation is not fulfilled, then the organisation that is not fulfilling that expectation is falling short, is it not?
Yes, I would
Thank
agree.
you. Thank you very much. Can I?
No,
Thank you.